don't know. Cataracts. Test. So do you require anything to go?
I'm not gonna use PowerPoint. So I'm gonna just use Microsoft Teams.
No PowerPoint today.
Can I close it?
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming to Climate Action Network Japan press briefing. My name is Yuri Okwo from Citizens Alliance for Saving the Atmosphere and the Earth. We have two speakers. First, we will hear from Kimiko Hirata from Kiko Network about the situation in Japan and Japan climate policy after Fukushima catastrophe. And second speaker is Naoyuki Yamagishi from WWF. He will talk about how we see Japan's position on climate negotiation here in Durban. So first, Kimiko, please.
Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to talk about two things. One is how devastating the nuclear accident is once it happens, and second is achievement of 25 reduction target is still possible without nuclear. So let's start with the nuclear accident. As you all know, dangerous radioactive materials were released from Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Even now, low-level radiation is leaked from the site. It makes the recovery from earthquake and tsunami very difficult. As the information about fallout was limited for a certain period, people, especially in Fukushima, were needlessly exposed to radiation. Japan's land is largely contaminated, and it caused serious safety problems on soil, water, and food. Government had started to clean up, but we all know that perfect cleanup is impossible, and it is very costly. Some concerned that health problems, including diseases and cancer, will be occurring within the next couple of years. So from all of these terrible things we experience day by day, tell us how damaging the nuclear accident is. I cannot emphasize more that nuclear technology is totally unsustainable, environmentally, socially, and economically. I call for the world to learn from our experience and reconsider to promote nuclear. So what's the implication to climate policy? That's my second point. Currently, about 10 nuclear power plants are operating out of 54 nuclear plants due to accident as well as periodic check. It is expected to decrease towards zero next year because local governors don't allow reoperating in their regions. It raises concern about one, near-term power shortage, and two, CO2 increase. So for one near-term power shortage, we think it is manageable through demand-side management and some other measures to shift peak time. And for two, CO2 increase, actually Japan came to Durban with its pledge of a 25 reduction target by 2020, and it remains as it is. However, domestically, it is loudly says that keeping that 25 reduction target is now difficult without nuclear. The government actually intends to weaken the target after Durban. Yes, it is tougher than before, but it is apparently possible to meet 25 reduction target without nuclear. We may expect slight increase according to fossil fuel increase next couple of years. But mid and long-term emission trend depends on policies. We can shift from coal to gas, swift improve energy efficiency, and increase renewables. There are plenty of means besides nuclear to reduce emissions. It's all up to political decisions and policies to be taken. Here in Durban, Japan can and should underpin 25 reduction target and promise to pass its domestic climate bill next year. Furthermore, Japan should commit its target under the Kyoto Protocol. This is a responsibility to global climate. Japan can do it, and Japan should do it.
Thank you. We go straight to the next speaker, Naoki from WWF Japan. We'll talk about how we see Japan's position in this negotiation.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, and thanks John for joining us today. And I'm glad to see at least a few of the journalists in here. So Kimiko talked about the domestic side of the Japanese story, so I'm going to make some comments from international perspective. Simply put, the largest problem about Japanese position here is that Japan came to Durban empty-handed, hoping to have good results like an observer. So there are two major problems about this position. The first, as you all know, Japan refuses to join the second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol. And from our perspective, Japan should join the second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol because Japan has a historical responsibility as a developed country to act first on the climate change. And also, if the country cannot, honor the treaty that was created under its own chairmanship, who is going to take Japan's proposal seriously? I mean, Japan says Japan wants to have a more wider and a comprehensive, effective, fair global agreement. But who cares if Japan cannot honor the treaty that was created under its own chairmanship? And in addition to this moral obligation, there is another problem here. Because Japan often uses the reason that Kyoto Protocol only covers 27 or 28% of global emissions. So the new treaty or new framework should cover more than that. And Japan often uses the Cancun pledges as an example because it roughly covers 80%. But the problem is not how the Kyoto under the current form of the Kyoto Protocol covers. How much the current form of the Kyoto Protocol covers or not. The problem is in what way Japan can get agreement from developing countries to accept further climate actions in the future without agreeing to the second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol. Because that's the critical condition from developing countries' perspective. So if you do not agree to that condition, Japan has to provide at least some kind of alternative. But Japan does that. So that's the crucial problem. So the question is not 27.8 or 28% versus 80%. The problem is that how Japan can get agreement, or how can Japan provide a step forward towards the global agreement Japan says it wants to have. So the second problem is that the Japan hasn't been engaged in a discussion of long-term finance positively. This is another key condition for developing countries. And Japan hasn't really provided anything. And it is true that Japan is not in a really good shape, especially economically, after what happened in March 11th this year. But still, after the Fukushima and after the tsunami, after the earthquake, more than 150 countries provided support for Japan. And in response to that, if the Japan provides nothing, or if the response to that support shown by more than 150 countries is simply rejecting the Kyoto and providing no finance context, then that should be a kind of shameful. And Japan should at least agree to establish a formal process to discuss the innovative sources for long-term finance at this COP. So, in a nutshell, Japan is missing a crucial opportunity to contribute to a creation of a basis for the future framework and reducing its own importance by providing or bringing nothing to the table. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So now I would like to take questions. Nobody? Yes, please.
John Herskowitz from Reuters. I'm just wondering if you think Japan is in a position financially to manage the shift from nuclear power to other forms of electricity, and also to provide overseas assistance. And Japan already has one of the world's highest debt to GDP ratios. It's an aging society. The welfare budget is going to increase. Tax base is decreasing. where will all this money come from, especially given the enormous debt burden Japan has?
I think that's exactly the kind of question we have to have a place to discuss. And one of the key things is that Japan hasn't introduced any carbon pricing schemes domestically. So one possible revenue for that kind of support is some kind of carbon tax or emissions trading scheme, revenue from the emissions trading scheme. That could be the one type of the source of the domestic fundings. But at the same time, we also have to consider international sources of funding, such as bankers, like international transport or international aviation. So taxing those emissions from those sectors is another possible promising source of financing for the long-term financing. I mean, I'm not talking about, when I talk about long-term finance, I'm not talking about Japan alone should provide all the finance. I mean, of course not. But still, there are some ways to raise funds internationally, and Japan hasn't provided even preference over which international finance, innovative finance schemes are preferable or something. So that's the one key, frustration I have about Japanese position, because, probably you know that there are many discussions around this international financing sources, but Japan, kind of showing that that may be work, but United States is opposing to, and that's for example, international transport and aviation. Developing countries are not in favor of this, so Japan is not really pushing it. So that sort of attitude is not really helping. So at least Japan has to provide which option is promising, and agree to the establishment of the consideration of such sources.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Hello, NHK Mitamura. So the Environmental Minister, Mr. Hosono, has arrived today. So what are your message to him? I mean, what kind of action you want from him?
As you see, Japanese youth wear the T-shirts of I Love Kyoto. And as a non-profit organizations from Japan, would like to ask the Environment Minister to honor the Kyoto Protocol, and then we consider to join the Kyoto Protocol. That's the first message I'd like to raise. Probably compared to the last year, Japan don't get that much criticism on that issues, but criticism is there, and then that criticism is there, and then he needs to recognize that. And also, I'd like him to be very constructive to get a good deal on the mandate, but he has to be aware, I think, that Kyoto is a big, important element of the package of the Durban Agreement.
Any additional questions? Then thank you very much for coming, and we will be standing in a hallway for a question you may have. Thank you very much.